Ever walk into a room and just completely misread the vibe? Like, thought it was going to be super tense, but everyone was actually in a good mood.
Oh, absolutely. Happens all the time.
It makes you realize how much our minds are kind of like actively constructing our reality, not just passively taking it in, right?
Yeah, our brains are always interpreting, filtering information, not just recording it objectively.
That's what I thought was so interesting in that article. Seeing is not believing. The idea that we each have this personal lens, but it's not like a perfectly clear window. You know what I mean?
Right, right. It's colored by our experiences, our biases, all sorts of things we might not even be aware of.
So it's like we're all walking around looking at the world through these like slightly different tinted glasses.
Exactly. And that impacts everything. Our relationships, the decisions we make, even just how we navigate daily life.
Speaking of decisions, that example of the engineers totally clashing really hit home for me. Like both super smart guys, but their perceptions of each other were so skewed, it tanked the whole project.
Ugh, yeah, classic case of confirmation bias in action. It's crazy how our brains latch onto information that confirms what we already believe, even if it's wrong.
Like, see? I knew it. Total tunnel vision.
And anything that challenges that view, we tend to just ignore. It's why those echo chambers form, where we surround ourselves with people who reinforce our existing beliefs. No room for new information or growth.
And the article pointed out how this doesn't just happen in work situations. Like, imagine a couple with totally different views on spending money.
Oof, yeah, that's setting themselves up for constant conflict. They're literally seeing the same situation through completely different lenses.
No wonder communication breaks down. It's that they're speaking different languages.
That's a great way to put it. The article used this metaphor of a shattered lens, which I thought was powerful. If our lens is broken, we're seeing this fractured, distorted version of reality, and it impacts every interaction we have.
Okay, so we've established our perceptions are often messed up. What can we actually do about it?
Well, the article gave some good tips. Self-awareness was a big one. Really taking stock of your own biases, where they come from, how they might be influencing you.
And also seeking out diverse views, like actively making an effort to expose yourself to different perspectives, right?
Absolutely. Talk to people with different backgrounds, read things that challenge your beliefs. That's how you expand your understanding and start seeing a fuller picture.
And fact-checking. Seems obvious, but it's so easy to just accept whatever you read online these days.
Especially in this age of information overload, it's crucial to develop that healthy skepticism. Don't take anything at face value. Verify through reliable sources.
And empathy. That seems like a major key when people's perceptions are just totally clashing.
It's huge. Even if you don't agree with someone's viewpoint, trying to understand where it's coming from, what experiences shaped it, can make a world of difference.
It's like stepping into their shoes for a minute, even if you don't want to wear those shoes all the time.
Right. It's about recognizing that their reality is just as valid to them as yours is to you. That's where a real connection starts to happen.
Now, that other source we looked at, your brain might be distorting reality, took things in a really interesting direction. It focused on how our physical state and actions can actually change what we perceive.
Yeah, that research is mind-blowing. Like, it's not just about what our senses are picking up. Our brains are constantly adapting, recalibrating based on what we're doing and how we're feeling in that moment.
I was fascinated by the studies with athletes. The ones who were playing well actually perceived the ball or the target as larger, almost like their brain was giving them a competitive edge.
It's like their brain was saying, hey, you got this. It's easier than you think, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
But what about when we're struggling? Does our brain work against us then?
It can definitely seem that way. If you're tired, that hill suddenly looks a lot steeper. Your brain might be saying, conserve energy, buddy. Let's skip this one.
Like in that study with the backpacks.
Right. Exactly. People wearing heavy backpacks perceive the same hill as being way steeper than those without the extra weight. It's as if the brain was saying, you're already carrying a lot, don't overdo it.
So it's like our brain is trying to protect us from pushing ourselves too hard.
In a way, yeah. It's constantly adapting to our current state and adjusting our perception accordingly, which makes you wonder, how much control do we really have over what we see?
That's a great question, and one we'll definitely be exploring further. But first, let's take a quick break.
Sounds good. That's the big question, isn't it? Like, if our brains are constantly tweaking things, is there even such a thing as, like, objective reality?
Right. Makes you wonder.
Yeah, and honestly, the answer is probably not simple. We might never completely get rid of those subjective filters, but we can at least become more aware of them and how they're affecting us.
So it's not about, like, achieving perfect objectivity, but more about recognizing our own biases and working with them.
Exactly. It's kind of like if you've been wearing like rose-colored glasses your whole life, so you can't just suddenly take them off, but at least now you know they're there and how they've been changing what you see.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually get better at, like, recognizing those biases?
Well, the article mentioned a few things like mindfulness meditation and cognitive behavioral therapy.
CBT, right, I've heard of that.
Yeah, and they both kind of work in different ways. Mindfulness is more about just like noticing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, just observing them as they come and go.
Okay, so you're not trying to change anything. You're just becoming more aware of what's going on in your head.
Exactly. And then CBT is more about actively challenging and changing those negative thought patterns that can really mess with our perception.
So if you catch yourself thinking, I'm going to totally screw up this presentation, you use CBT to, like, talk back to that thought and replace it with something more positive.
Exactly. It's about shifting your internal dialogue to be more supportive and helpful rather than critical and self-sabotaging.
So it's like becoming more conscious architects of our own minds.
Yeah, I love that analogy. It's taking control of those mental blueprints and designing a more resilient, positive way of seeing the world.
Now, there's another layer to this whole perception thing, right? It's not just about how WE see things, but also how other people see things.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where mind theory comes in. It's basically the ability to understand that other people have their own thoughts, beliefs, and perspectives, and those might be totally different from our own.
So it's like recognizing that everyone else has their own rich inner world, just as complex as ours.
Exactly. And those inner worlds shape how they see and interact with everything around them. It's why someone might react to a situation in a way that seems totally baffling to us. We're not seeing it through their lens.
Totally. It's like we're all walking around with these different internal maps, and those maps determine how we navigate the same terrain.
Such a great way to put it. And those map differences are why there are so many like misunderstandings and conflicts.
Okay, so how do we get better at this whole mind theory thing? Is it something we're born with, or can we actually develop it?
It's a little bit of both. Kids start developing mind theory pretty early on, but it keeps evolving throughout life. It's like a muscle that gets stronger the more you use it.
Okay, so what are some exercises for that mind theory muscle? Give us the workout routine.
One of the best is active listening. And I don't just mean hearing the words, but really paying attention to what the other person is saying, both verbally and non-verbally.
So, like, picking up on their tone of voice, their body language, all those subtle cues that tell us what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, exactly. It's about putting aside our own judgments and assumptions and genuinely trying to see the world from their point of view.
That sounds like a challenge, especially when we're so used to filtering everything through our own lens. It's like trying to see with someone else's glasses on.
It definitely takes practice, but the payoff is huge. When
No,
we can truly understand where someone else is coming from, it opens up a whole new level of communication and connection.
it's like building a bridge between those different internal maps we were talking about.
Yes. And that bridge can lead to greater empathy, compassion, and cooperation, which are essential for any healthy relationship.
Okay, so active listening is one exercise.
Mhm.
What else can we do to strengthen our mind theory?
Asking clarifying questions is huge. It shows that you're genuinely interested in understanding the other person's perspective and that you're not just making assumptions.
So instead of just nodding along and pretending you get it, you actually stop and say, wait, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly. Those clarifying questions can uncover hidden meanings, clear up misunderstandings, and deepen our understanding of the other person's inner world.
And what about perspective taking? Remember the article mentioned that too.
Right. Perspective taking is basically like a mental simulation. You consciously imagine yourself in the other person's shoes, trying to see the world through their eyes.
So you're stepping outside of your own head and into theirs, even if just for a minute.
Exactly. It's a powerful way to cultivate empathy and challenge our own biases. It allows us to consider alternative interpretations of a situation and break free from that limited perspective we often get stuck in.
Okay, so active listening, clarifying questions, perspective taking, those are some great tools. Anything else we can add to our mind theory workout routine?
You know, it's surprisingly helpful. Reading fiction.
Really? How does that help us understand real people better?
Well, think about it. When we read fiction, we're immersed in the thoughts and feelings of characters who are different from ourselves. We get to walk in their shoes, experience their joys and sorrows, see the world through their eyes.
So it's like a low-stakes way to practice perspective taking.
Yeah.
We can explore different viewpoints without the real-world consequences of, like, a heated argument.
Exactly. It's a mental workout for mind theory. And the more we practice, the better we become at understanding the complexities of human behavior and motivation.
Okay, this whole concept of mind theory is blowing my mind. It's like unlocking a secret code to human interaction.
It really is. When we understand that other people have their own unique perspectives and motivations, it can revolutionize the way we communicate and relate to each other. It can transform conflicts into opportunities for growth and understanding.
So much to think about. This has been a super insightful deep dive so far. We've covered how our brains distort reality, the power of mind theory, but there's still one piece of the puzzle we haven't talked about, right?
Right. We've talked about individual biases and understanding other minds, but we also need to consider the impact of culture on perception.
That makes sense. Our culture shapes our values, beliefs, and how we interpret the world around us. It's like another lens we're looking through.
Exactly. Someone from a collectivist culture where group harmony is emphasized might perceive a situation very differently than someone from a more individualistic culture where independence is valued.
And those differences can lead to all sorts of misunderstandings, especially in communication.
Absolutely. Like that example in the article about the manager who gave direct feedback to an employee from a culture where indirect communication is the norm. The manager thought they were being helpful, but the employee felt embarrassed and disrespected.
It's a good reminder that we need to be sensitive to those cultural differences, especially when interacting with people from diverse backgrounds. What might seem obvious or appropriate to us might not be to someone else.
It's all about being respectful of other perspectives, even if they're different from our own, and being willing to learn from each other.
So to navigate this complex world of perception, we need to be aware of our own biases, try to understand other people's minds, and be sensitive to cultural differences. That's a lot to keep in mind.
It is, but with practice, we can get better at it. And the rewards are huge. Stronger relationships, more effective communication, and a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
It's like we're leveling up our human interaction skills.
Exactly.
This has been an awesome deep dive. So many fascinating insights about how easily our perceptions can be skewed. It really makes you think twice about what you're seeing and hearing.
It does. And it reminds us that we need to be constantly questioning our assumptions and seeking out different perspectives. The world is way more complex and interesting than our limited perceptions might suggest.
So the big question now is, how do we actually apply all this knowledge in our daily lives? How do we shift our perceptions and make real positive changes?
That's the key, right? Moving from awareness to action. And that's exactly what we'll be exploring in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so we've spent the last two parts in this deep dive really digging into how our brains can kind of like distort reality,
Yeah.
and how things like our actions, emotions, even our culture can like twist what we see.
Right. Tons of factors influencing our perceptions.
But now I want to get practical. How do we take all this knowledge and actually apply it to our everyday lives?
Yeah. How do we move from just knowing about this stuff to actually, like, changing how we see things?
Exactly. So what's the like first step in actually shifting our perception?
Well, seeing is not believing. Really emphasize self-awareness as, like, the foundation for all this. It's like holding up a mirror to your own thoughts and asking, okay, why am I seeing things this way? What assumptions am I bringing to the table?
Right, like checking your baggage at the door, basically.
Exactly. And once you've kind of like taken stock of your own biases, the next step is actively seeking out diverse perspectives. Like, don't just hang out with people who agree with you all the time.
Yeah, get out of that echo chamber.
Exactly. Get comfortable being challenged, even a little uncomfortable sometimes. Because the wider our range of information sources, the more accurate our view of the world becomes.
It's like that saying, right? If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Totally. We need those people who see things differently, who can point out our blind spots.
And fact-checking. That seems more important than ever these days with, like, information overload everywhere you look.
Oh, absolutely. We can't just blindly absorb everything we read online or hear on the news. We got to develop that healthy skepticism, double-check things,
Become like an investigative journalist for your own life.
Haha, I like that. Exactly. Be a critical thinker, not just a passive consumer of information.
And then there's empathy. That seems like a superpower when it comes to bridging the gap when people just, don't see eye to eye.
It's huge. Even if you completely disagree with someone's viewpoint, trying to understand where they're coming from, what experiences shaped that perspective can make a world of difference.
It's like even if you wouldn't choose to wear their shoes, you can at least try to understand why they like those shoes so much.
Yeah, great analogy. And it's not about saying their perspective is right or wrong. It's just about acknowledging that it's valid to them. And that's where real connection starts.
So far, we've got self-awareness, seeking diverse views, fact-checking, and empathy. What other practical tools can help us shift our perception?
Seeing is not believing also talked about mindfulness, which I think is super valuable.
Yeah, mindfulness. What exactly does that look like in practice?
It's basically paying attention to the present moment without judgment. Like noticing your thoughts and feelings as they come up, but not getting swept away by them.
So instead of instantly reacting to a situation based on your initial perception, you hit the pause button and create space for a more thoughtful response.
Exactly. It's about breaking those automatic reactions and habitual thought patterns that can really distort our view of things.
And what about CBT? Cognitive behavioral therapy. I know the article mentioned that as a technique for, tackling negative thought patterns.
Yeah, CBT is great for pinpointing those distorted thoughts that lead to unhelpful behaviors or emotions and then actively working to change them. It's about replacing those negative thoughts with more balanced and realistic ones.
So if you find yourself thinking, oh, I'm going to totally bomb this presentation, you'd use CDT to challenge that thought and replace it with okay, I've prepared well, I'm going to do my best.
Exactly. It's about rewriting those negative scripts that are playing in our heads.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together. But, I got to be honest. It doesn't sound easy, changing these deep-seated habits of perception.
It takes effort for sure, but like any skill, the more we practice, the better we get. The more we use these tools, the more we strengthen those perception muscles and the better equipped we are to see the world more accurately.
One thing that really stuck with me from Your Brain Might Be Distorting Reality was how much our physical state can impact what we see. Like those hikers who saw the hill as way steeper when they were tired.
Right. It's a good reminder to prioritize well-being.
Yeah.
Getting enough sleep, eating nutritious foods, managing stress, these all play a role in how we perceive the world.
So feeling burned out and exhausted could literally make everyday challenges seem more daunting.
Exactly. Our physical and mental states are super interconnected. When we take care of our bodies, it helps us see things more clearly, too.
Wow, this whole deep dive has been mind-blowing. I mean, it's incredible to think about how much control we have over our own reality simply by shifting how we perceive things.
It is empowering, right? We're not just passive passengers along for the ride. We can actively shape our experience.
We're like artists, and these tools and techniques are our paintbrushes.
I love that. The more skilled we become with those brushes, the more beautiful and fulfilling our reality can be.
So listeners, next time you find yourself misjudging a situation, remember, your perception might not be giving you the whole picture. Take a breath, question your assumptions, try a different angle. You might be amazed at what you discover. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll catch you next time.